Hey, so thank you all for attending our first session of Partnering for a Purpose this year. We're really excited to have Lyndsey Lyman from the Food Bank of the Southern Tier. I won't read the entire description verbatim, as I think you all have already seen it. The background to this is we have long since admired the client advocacy and engagement that the Food Bank of the Southern Tier has done. And as we were planning sessions this year, we thought, who better to have than the Food Bank of the Southern Tier talking about client engagement? And so we have Lyndsey Lyman of the Food Bank of the Southern Tier. Lyndsey, before you start, do you want to just give a quick introduction about your role at the Food Bank?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks so much, Tim. Thanks everybody for being here this morning. I'm really excited to share with y'all and also hear your questions and chat with you a bit about this topic that's really dear to my heart. So yes, I'm Lyndsey Lyman. I'm currently the Community Empowerment Manager at the Food Bank, but I say current because I've been at the Food Bank about 10 and a half years, and I've held a few different roles, handful of different roles in that time. I have worked directly with our agencies, so our food pantries, meal programs, after school programs, that sort of thing, and done kind of like capacity and compliance work with them. And then, maybe 8 years ago or so, I moved over into our advocacy and education department, which is what it was at the time, and started getting my hands involved in this work and client engagement work, and education, helping folks better understand the issues of food insecurity and poverty and kind of related factors as well. So things like the racial wealth gap, which we also have a training on. So then I also got involved with advocacy, public policy advocacy for a time. That now lives in another role, and I've been able to kind of sink in a little more with client engagement, education, and then I also help out and supervise Teresa Kraus, who some of you may know. She is the Broome County Food Council Coordinator, and that position is housed at the food bank. So I support that work as well. So yeah, do you want me to just jump right in here, Tim? You're muted, but I think you're saying yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
you got me. And just to reiterate, if anyone has a question, feel free to
Yeah,
pop that in chat or just unmute yourselves. And besides that, try to stay muted just so we're able to have a good sound.
absolutely. Yes. Thank you. So, I'll tell you a little bit more about me, just to get us started. Oh, you know what? Sorry, I think I'm having one little technical issue. Huh. There we go. It wouldn't let me advance the slide for a moment. So I wanted to share just a little bit more about myself, and then we're going to do kind of this whole client engagement overview, right, which is the main meat of our session here today. So we'll talk about why would a nonprofit engage with clients? What is the purpose and benefit of that, right? What are some key principles of this work? And then I'll tell you a little bit more about how we've done it and hopefully just provide some examples that might be useful for you at your organization. And there's kind of three main buckets of this. So that includes leadership development, something we could talk about as narrative change or storytelling, and then just kind of doing some client advising work, so surveys and feedback loops. So to give you a little bit more about myself, I was actually born and raised in Broome County. I graduated from Maine Endwell High School. Um, and I'm currently the community empowerment manager at the food bank. Like I said, I've been here over 10 years. And I have a background in sociology, community organizing, as well as a bit in communications and journalism. So I'm really interested also in that narrative change piece, which I'll get more into what I mean when I say that. But it all kind of goes hand in hand for me, working with clients and sharing their stories to help people better understand these issues. I'm also a wife and mother of two boys. That picture at the top there is of our little family out on a hike. And that second picture I just included to give a little context of that's basically my neighborhood. So I live in a pretty rural area, and I think that that aspect of our area, right, in Broome County in the Southern Tier, having a lot of a really interesting mix of folks, right, with different backgrounds and having both city centers and really rural areas that we all serve in our different capacities, and just knowing that people are coming from all walks of life. And that's where we're at right now is in this really great farmland area. So let's jump into why would we engage with clients, right? So obviously each of us at our different organizations, we have somebody that we're trying to serve, right? Somebody that we are hoping to help, hoping to improve their lives. And that's a little different, for some of us potentially, but for us at the food bank, obviously that means folks with lived experience is what we say in food insecurity and poverty. Um, and so for us, it really boils down to client engagement really means that we are incorporating the voices and the expertise of people who have lived experience in our issue area. So there's a couple of like jargony things in here that I'll break down, right? So we talk about folks with lived experience, meaning they've lived it, right? It's part of their lives. They have that experience that they have felt deep in their bones in this issue area of, for us, food insecurity, right? So we then consider those folks an expert. So a lot of times we've been trained, especially in nonprofit land, right, to think of experts as the folks with the data, the folks with the kind of quantitative information. And that information is super important. We can't make decisions without that information, right? And at the same time, we can think of that as like a content expert. If you're familiar at all with some of the work that is being done around like, bringing together different sectors. They talk about this where there's content experts and then there's context experts. So when we have somebody with lived experience and they're bringing in that context of like, SNAP works like XYZ. And in my experience, these factors come into play, right? So if we don't have the full picture, if we don't have that lived experience or expertise of somebody with who's had that experience themselves, right? And I think it's also a misnomer. I'd just like to add that people who work at nonprofits don't have lived experience, right? Plenty of us do in our issue area, right? So at the food bank, we know that we have folks who have experienced food insecurity and have come to the work because of that, right? Because they are so passionate about it and because they don't want other people to have to go through what they went through in their family or as an individual. So it's not that you can only be one or the other, but we want to make sure that we are incorporating both that content expertise and context expertise, or the expertise of people who've lived through something. And at the food bank in particular, client engagement work supports these kind of two goal areas that we have that we call increasing access and good food. So increasing access sounds, basically both of these sound just like what they or are just what they sound like, right? So increasing access means reaching people who we haven't reached before, mostly, and making sure that everyone who needs our services is being touched by our services, right? And then good food is about providing good quality, high quality food, right? But also things like culturally appropriate foods, things that are going to work, and foods that are specific and would work for different dietary restrictions, right? So these are two issue areas where how will we know that we're succeeding if we're not actually talking to and working with the people we're trying to serve, right? And I think that kind of sounds like a no-brainer. And there was a time, 15 years ago, say, where the food bank really wasn't doing a lot of this, right? And it's still kind of like a relatively new concept in some areas of the nonprofit world to actually really be having these deep relationships with the people that we're trying to serve. So this is kind of our litmus test, right? How do we know that we're doing what we hope to be doing? We can figure that out by doing client engagement work. And there's this really cool graphic that kind of illustrates this a bit. So this is considered the spectrum of client engagement, right? So, or of community engagement. So we can see over here on the left, we start with informing, right? So we're just providing information to the public or providing information to the people that we are aiming to serve. And um, that's a great place to start, right? If we're not already doing that. And then we can kind of level up from there. We can go to consulting, right? So we might get their feedback, we might get their input on potential decisions that we're making. And then we go to involve. So we can be working with folks that we are trying to serve or with the public to understand the issues from their point of view a little better, right? And then collaborate is really where it gets interesting, right? So if we're really truly kind of partnering with the people that we're looking to serve, with the communities we're serving, and having them become a lot more embedded in those decisions we're making. And then empowering is like, whew, that's kind of on obviously the furthest end of the spectrum, because we're no longer the only decision makers in that scenario, right? We have folks from the public who are actually decision makers in that instance, right? And I will tell you that the food bank is not there, right? We definitely inform and consult. We involve sometimes, we collaborate a little bit. I wouldn't say that we're at really truly, if we're being honest, the empowering stage, right? But this is a spectrum, and different decisions that we make can fall into different areas of the spectrum, right? It doesn't have to be that we're like constantly aiming to do an empowering decision-making process all the time, right? That might not actually work for us. At the food bank, we, when we have a new hire, I often joke like, yeah, you'll know all the alphabet soup, all of the acronyms that we have, right? And all of the different things that go into our work, because the food banking is actually kind of its own weird little industry, right? If you know food banking at all. So the emergency food network is sort of this whole other thing. And so it takes a new hire, somebody who's actually working at the food bank day in and day out, close to a year to really like fully wrap their heads around everything, right? So how can we expect people with lived experience who are living their lives, working their jobs, raising their children, right, tending to their families, to really have all the information to make a decision on every single thing? That's not realistic, right? But where can we engage people? Where can we utilize their expertise, right? Where can we empower folks? Those are the kinds of questions that we're always asking. I will pause here and just see if there's any questions. I haven't been keeping an eye on the chat. I guess you will let me know, Tim, if you see anything that I don't see. Okay, so again, just feel free to chime in if anything comes to mind. So what exactly do we mean when we say client engagement, right? That's the part of the why. So at the food bank, some examples of our work with client engagement include, and I'm going to get into all of these a little more deeply shortly, but this includes our what's called our community advocates training and our community advocates program, client storytelling, something I call client advising, which sounds like we're advising clients, but really they're advising us, right? So we do this through surveys, some amount of listening sessions and interviews, and we're working on getting a lot better with our feedback loops. And again, I'll explain what all these are. So if you're like, what? Just hold on one moment. And then also something we refer to as client communications. So the food bank historically has not really had direct line of communication regularly with clients. That's something we've been trying to solve in the last few years, and we're getting there. And then client compensation, which I will also explain more fully. So just to give you a little like background on our journey, in 2015, that was when we had our first client focus groups. Okay, so before 2015, a lot of you may be familiar with Randy Quackenbush, who's the VP of Community Impact at the food bank. She and I both started in 2014 or thereabouts. She started in late 2013. And by 2015, we were working on a new strategic plan for 2016, 2018, right? And we were talking about all these different stakeholder groups. Who are we going to talk with? Who are we going to get the information from, right? And at first, our clients, the people we were trying to serve, were not on that list. And so it was Randy and I and a couple other folks, and Natasha Thompson, who was our CEO at the time, who was really supportive of this work. And we got together and we said, like, we really need to get feedback from clients if we're planning out what we're doing for the next 2 years. It used to be that the board and senior leadership team, would get in a room with a consultant and they'd bang out a plan for the next few years, right? And that would be our strategic plan, right? And as many organizations have, we've evolved over time. And so 2015 was the first time that we did those client focus groups, and we really got the feedback of what does the community think we should be focusing on, right, in the next 3 years. That born out of that was our first community advocates training cohort, actually. So this was called Speakers Bureau at the time when Randy Quackenbush first started it. Our first cohort was in Tioga County. So we serve 6 counties, if you're not familiar: Broome, Tioga, Tompkins, Chemung, Schuyler, and Steuben. And so we had the first one in Owego, actually. And this was literally born out of a group of community members who were in the focus groups originally in 2015, who said, this is really cool. Like, we want to get together and keep getting together and talking about these issues. We're connected. We don't feel as alone in this, right? And our experiences, food insecurity, financial hardship. And Randy, had been inspired by some other work that she had witnessed recently, and it served some needs that we had in terms of building more connections in the community, having folks that were ready to talk to the media, right? Because we get those requests as nonprofits. And so that was our first cohort. Since then, we've had 5 additional cohorts, and our program has become really nationally recognized. So we've had this really interesting journey of a lot of other anti-hunger organizations kind of basing their client leadership training programs off of ours. And they, have wanted to kind of build off of that or tweak it for their purposes. And we've been, especially in the anti-hunger sphere, really fortunate to be able to kind of set the tone on some of these things. And that's been really interesting, and we felt very lucky to be able to have that kind of an influence. So a little more on our roots in client engagement, especially in Broome County. You might be familiar and might ring a bell for some of you. We also, in 2016, 2017, we were hosting a few community cafes, right? And we partnered with United Way, other organizations, right, on these kinds of events where we were bringing together all different stakeholders, including people with lived experience, but also elected officials, right? People who worked at nonprofits, getting folks together and really using this model called Community Cafe, which I could send some resources on if folks aren't as familiar with that. But it's this amazing model where you get people in a room, and with just a few simple but powerful tools and simple but powerful questions, you're able to get all this knowledge out of a community and all these different angles that people are bringing to it pretty quickly. And so that was, an exciting early part of our work. And we also were involved with WSKG's Chasing the Dream documentary series that they created. So a lot of the people with lived experience who were recorded for that came from our community advocates program. And Natasha Thompson, who was our CEO at the time, she was the host of that program. So that was a cool way to start bringing these stories out into the community. Okay, so this is kind of a little bit of the why and the what. In terms of how we do this work, I wanted to share a few key principles that we have learned really through kind of the hard way in some cases, that are really important when we are considering engaging with clients, engaging with members of the community that we're trying to serve, right? So this is kind of a busy graphic, but I want to draw your attention to kind of this lower left-hand corner. So we are really invested in something called trauma-informed care, which I'm sure you've heard about. This is something that's getting a lot more attention recently, which is really great. And it's something that a lot of the materials on this are still like focused on they have like a patient kind of language about them, but we can translate it right into our work no matter what. So if you haven't heard of trauma-informed care, basically it's this framework that says, hey, look, 70%, and this is like a pre-COVID number, so I'm going to go ahead and say like almost 100%, right, of people, of adults in the US have experienced some form of trauma. And this is a very specific definition of trauma that isn't just like, oh, something bad happened to us. Trauma is really about how does our brain process that event, right? So two people can be in a car accident. They can have nearly identical experiences, or they can be raised in the same home, right? Having a traumatic or the same experiences growing up, and one person can um, hold on to that or have that in their lives as a trauma, and then the other person, it can be processed through and not be a trauma. So it's really about how our brain is reacting to that, right? I'm no expert in this, but I'm just giving you a little bit of background. So knowing that so many people in our communities have experienced trauma-informed care, or have experienced trauma, excuse me, we want to have some of these principles in mind all the time, right? When we're making decisions, when we're working with clients in particular. So they have these 5 key principles of safety, trust, choice, which really means choice for that person that has the trauma or the lived experience, right? Collaboration, which is where we get into that spectrum that we were looking at earlier, right? And empowerment. I love that it says they're noticing capabilities in an individual. So coming at it from that strengths-based mindset, right? And then they also have these 4 R's of trauma-informed care, which I'm not going to get into just for time's sake right now, but this is like a great graphic for just getting some of these key principles. So um, we share these with the folks that we're working with in our community advocates program and things, and we really try to abide by them. And we also say, hey, if you find that it doesn't seem that we are sticking to these, let's all hold each other accountable, right? Let's make this a brave space in that we are calling on each other and saying, hey, I'm noticing like we're not actually having a lot of trust here, right? How can we build that? And then another key principle that we've talked about a lot when we've shared with people, some lessons learned and best practices is this idea of passing the mic. So something that has come up a lot when we have talked in nonprofit circles, um, and especially in food banking, right? Food banking is very much a charity-based model, right? We have a lot of deep roots in charity versus like more of a social justice type of mindset, right? And so that's fine, but a lot of times people hear people say, "Oh, we need to be a voice for the voiceless," right? We need to, speak up for people who can't. And we've been really impacted by different movements that have said, "No, no, you don't need to be a voice for the voiceless. Everybody has a voice. It's our job as an organization with power and a reputation and a microphone, right, to the public to just pass the mic. And then that person, and passing the mic doesn't just mean literally passing the mic and like getting them connected with the media and being able to share their story or whatever. It also means we have those connections, we have that expertise of how to best engage, for instance, with the media or with an elected official, right? So part of our training program is that microphone of saying like, okay, if you want to do this, you want to get your voice out there, awesome, let's help you get prepared to do that, right? So that's part of us passing the mic. Okay, so a little bit more on examples of how we do client engagement and perhaps things that might be applicable within your organization. So our first one is leadership development. So this is the Community Advocates Training, which is a leadership development and public speaking training for people with lived experience. And we've experimented with doing this both online and in person. I'm guessing you could guess which one won. It's a lot better to do this kind of stuff in person. In COVID, we had taken it online and it worked okay, but we've seen so much more retention of information, building of relationships, right, when we are in person. And our most recent cohort that graduated this past spring, we had 11 graduates and did that one in Ithaca. So we've kind of bounced around in our service area and then been able to offer these trainings over the years since 2016. And what happens with folks who go through this training is they're able to join our Community Advocates program. So currently we have 25 active members. You'll bring people through this training, and some people will stay really involved, right? And be able to have that capacity and be excited. Some people, were in it for more of like the connection and wanted to learn, but aren't, super active at this time. And other people have had honestly life experiences that have come up, challenges that have made it so that they're not able to be actively engaged, right? They aren't able to take the time and energy away from the pressing things in their lives or with their families, right? So it's kind of a spectrum of where folks land after they take the training. But we have monthly member meetings, and we have different initiatives that folks are able to excuse me, take part in. This year, we had a focus on voter registration and education, being obviously a very big election year. We really wanted to make sure we had more in-person events and building, community across those different cohorts of people that are coming from different areas and didn't go through the training together, so they weren't meeting weekly and getting to know each other as much. Now we're trying to build that cohesion amongst the group. And we've established a steering committee. So just building up leadership even within that group to help be part of the decision making and planning for what members of the group are doing. So to give you a little visual of the kinds of things that CAP members have done over the years, there's some photos here. So this is at a Put People First Pennsylvania People's Assembly. So that's some of our members and some of our mentors and some leaders in that movement. There's a couple photos from graduations here. So that's the 2019 celebration. They speak on panels and tell their stories and help people better understand the issues. So this is every year we do a presentation and a training with the Broome Leadership Institute. So this was the 2022 version of that. This is some more graduates at the 2023 celebration. And they really do a lot with sharing their story, right? So we talk about debunking the myths of who experiences food insecurity and why that is, right? Because there is a lot of misinformation out there. And so at graduation, they are prepared after working with Toastmasters for weeks to share that story and, help people better understand. So we're also doing some evaluation in this sphere. So I will say that this is not a perfect program, right? And there's been a lot of challenges. And this year we've had a really great opportunity to partner with doing some evaluation with Cornell University and Feeding America, of which we are a member agency. So we're constantly kind of looking at this program and seeing what is sustainable for staff, what's going to work for clients or for CAP members, right? Making adjustments based on that. So if community advocates program and the community advocates training is something that you're interested in, I do have kind of a little handbook that I have put together. So that's something that I can share with folks if they're interested. In terms of other ways that we engage with clients, the second one that I had talked about was something we call narrative change. So we have worked with a really interesting organization in the past called Center for Story-Based Strategy, if you want to look them up. And they do all this work on how we tell the stories of the issues that we're focused on, right, has a huge impact on how people see our issue, of course, but also how willing they are to participate, to donate, right, to volunteer, or different things like that. And so they talk a lot about how we frame something affects how we see it, right? What we leave in the frame, what we take out of the frame when we're telling a story or when we're talking about an issue. And so we've made some shifts, and we're still working on this, to tell more stories. And we have a newsletter, and we send out stories constantly to donors and different things, right? So we're making really conscious efforts when we are telling the stories of people with lived experience, of our clients, to make sure that those are strengths-based stories, right? It's very easy in nonprofit world to kind of say things are bad, or like somebody's really, really struggling, we need your help, especially when we're talking to donors, right? And that may be true. It may be that we need help. It may be that things are pretty rough in some cases, right? But we also want to say, instead of saying, because of your donation, Susie was able to get food for her family to, for this month or whatever, right? And like that may be true. It certainly is true, right? We are so, so grateful to donors that make our work possible. And at the same time, we want to be lifting up those strengths of that person who is working to get those resources for their family, right? Who might be working one or two jobs and, might be a single parent. Has this tenacity, right, to persevere even in difficult situations. And some of that credit also goes to that person, right, and their strengths. So we want to make sure to call that out. And people really respond really well to that. People have really loved to hear those stories in that way. So we're doing more and more focus on that, and kind of like internal policies that are kind of changing the way that we set up the stories that we tell through our different publications. We're also honoring the folks who are sharing their stories with us, honoring their expertise and their vulnerability with compensation. So that's what I'm going to get into in the next slide. But this is just an example of a newsletter that Jody is a member of the Community Advocates Program, and she helps run the mobile food pantry in Whitney Point. And she's just like lined up in front of these cars, right, kind of cracking up laughing, like in her community, in her element. And it's kind of just illustrates for me how important it is to share stories in that light. So another thing that we've done, which I was just talking about, is that client compensation. So because we are asking for people's time and their energy, and again, their kind of vulnerability and their expertise, if we were paying a consultant to tell us what we needed to do, right, an official consultant, they'd be getting paid, right? They would be, and they get paid well. So we've had this philosophy since the beginning that we also need to be compensating clients as experts, right, with that lived experience. And so we've kind of standardized that in recent years. We have a whole client compensation plan now, which includes a standard operating procedure, just to like, make sure everybody's on the same page with this, because we do have different parts of the food bank who have their hands in this pie. And we have this compensation matrix. So this is just like a little bit of a screenshot of that to ensure equity and timeliness. And nothing is sort of set in stone, right? But these are like some basics that we're trying to make sure we have at least like a ground floor of standardization, right? And we've also implemented this e-gift card processing tool called Ribbon. It's now called like something like BHN Rewards, but I still call it Ribbon because I think that's a way more fun name. So they are able to issue gift cards for us. We used to do these, physical cards, and that was a real headache, you can imagine. And so they are able to help with that processing and help us remind people if they haven't gotten a chance to use it, things like that. So that's become a really important tenet of like honoring people's time and energy, just as we would any other expert when we're getting their story, especially if we are anytime, but especially if it is a fundraising story, right? If we're going to be making money off of that, potentially significant money in that appeal, it doesn't seem right to us that we would include that and then not compensate that person who's providing that key nugget that might move a person to give, whereas they may not have if that weren't there. Okay, and then the last thing is something that I think any organization can do on various levels, right? So we're doing more in recent years, and I have to credit our data and evaluation team at the food bank with helping out with this. So client surveys, something called feedback loops. If you're not familiar with that, I'm sure most folks are, but just in case, I'll say there's this concept that if we get feedback from somebody, it's really important that if we make a change based on that, which hopefully in a lot of cases we are, maybe not every case. But if we're making a change based on that, that we then sort of close the loop and go back to that person, right? And tell them, hey, thank you so much for what you shared with us about what you think we need to be doing. Here's what we've changed based on that, so that that person feels the value in their contributions, understands that it's valuable to us, will maybe come back again and give us more feedback another time, right? And it builds faith, right, and trust in our organization that we're doing this for good reason, and that it's not just lip service, right? That we're actually making changes based off what we're hearing from the community. So we do a client survey. I believe we're going to be doing it every other year now. But our most recent survey had over 1,900 participants, which we were pretty happy with. It can be challenging to get to a number like that, right? So, given our service area and everything, the folks that we're consulting with on our evaluation on our like survey processes, they, who are experts in these areas, they were like, "Yep, that's a great number." And then from there, we were able to do interviews with select participants. So mostly Jen Bertrand, if you know of her. She's been at the food bank a long time too. But other members of our team were able to dive in with some of the participants of the survey who said they'd be willing to be contacted, and just get a lot more rich information from them on what's going on in their lives, what their experience has been like with food pantries, with mobile food pantries, right, with school food centers. And that's provided a lot more context and richness that we've been able to include in our decision making. And then I had mentioned earlier on that a key kind of like nut that's been tough for us to crack as the food bank, being that we are the warehousing nonprofit, right? We're based in Elmira, and then we serve our 6 counties. And really most of our work is getting food out into the community, right? Through food pantries, meal programs, mobile food pantries. But most of it is not actually directly distributing food from us. It goes through a partner, right? And before it gets to that community member. So because we have that kind of separation a little bit, right, in our model, it's been a little bit difficult to have a direct line of communication with clients in some cases. So we're setting up a couple of things to work on this. One is that our client communications team has been closing that feedback loop, sharing changes that we have made through our website. And we're also working on a client newsletter. So we have a newsletter that goes out quarterly, but it's really just kind of generally, in terms of an audience, it's pretty general / donors, right? And what we have been aiming to create, and we're hoping to come out in 2025, is a client newsletter. So created by members of CAP, our Community Advocates Program, for clients, going out to sites like offices that accept Medicaid, right? DSS offices, places where maybe people who haven't experienced the food bank's services before might pick it up and not only become aware of our services or try out using our services for the first time, which is a goal of ours, but also might feel a little bit less alone in their experience, or see an opportunity where they might be able to learn a little more, take on some leadership, right? And the one of the first story ideas that came up as we were working with Community Advocates Program members on this was Dawn Tallett, who some of you may know, who is part of the Broome County Food Council and is a member of our Community Advocates Program. She talks about being like the poster child of Alice, right? Which, if you know of the United Way, you know of Alice. And she will go to workshops, she'll go in different things and explain the concept of Alice to people and talk about her experience being, a perfect representation of that. And she wanted to write about the concept of Alice and what Alice folks, need in order to see improvements in their quality of life in our newsletter, right? So she wanted people to know about that. Like, hey, if you are, working and on a fixed, income, and, you are still struggling to get by, like, you are not alone, right? There's a lot of us. So those are the kinds of things that we are trying to build out to have more direct connections with clients. And we're also planning out a whole texting service actually also. Right now we text folks mostly as like reminders for mobile food pantries. They can sign up for that, but we're also going to be offering a sign up to receive news like this, different alerts that might pertain to folks if they're participating in benefit programs like SNAP, things like that. So that is the content that I have for you, and we have plenty of time for questions. So I would love to just hear any feedback that folks have and what questions you have. And I'll stop sharing so we can all see each other a little better.
As we go into questions, I just want to say thank you so much, Lyndsey. I know how busy you are and how much work you have on your plate. So giving us your time today and giving this presentation has been wonderful. And I definitely have some questions, but I can talk anyone's ear off. So I'll let others ask first.
I did have a kind of a technical question about the survey where you had 1,900 people respond. I'm curious what you did to incentivize folks to be able to give that feedback.
Good question. Yep, there's definitely an incentive. So we have purchased or kind of tried out different things with this when we've had a smaller survey, where it was only going to a few, like not a few, but a smaller targeted group. We were able to offer like a $10 um in one of those e-gift cards, right, to each participant. But on these larger scales, what we do is a raffle. So I mean, obviously organizations can choose what makes the most sense for them, but it's a raffle of, say, 10 or 20 people are going to get this dollar amount, and we just choose at random from the people who have participated. But that seemed to work well, and have people chiming in with their 2 cents. So yeah.
Hi.
Hi there.
I have a question about the Community Advocates program. Like, how did you do the recruitment, and did you get into like troubles with retention, and how did you work around that?
Was the second part of your question challenges with retention? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is laid out a little more in the handbook that I'm happy to share with folks. That's not like, we keep talking about beautifying that. It's not like a attractive document right now, but it's like has all the information in it. So I'm happy to share that. That's really meant to go to anyone who's interested. But I can say for now, in the kind of the shorthand, that the recruiting has definitely evolved over time. And I would say that COVID, the pandemic, impacted that. So pre-COVID, we were able to work with, just like a key high performing agency, right? We could call up one of our kind of more robust food pantries in the area that we were hoping to work in, and they would be able to get a slate of 15 people signed up for us, right? And we did it that way because, again, as the food bank being a little more removed, we don't have those relationships directly with people. A lot of you may, right, and your organizations have those direct relationships. But we asked them to not only invite people, but think through like who do you really think might be a good fit for this? Invite them personally. We've found that we've had the most success with people joining who are invited personally by someone who knows them and says to them, I learned about this program. I think it'd be a really good fit for you. I think you'd do really well in this, right? And here's XYZ reasons. It's just like anything. We all get so many invitations to so many things, even if it's socially. Like if somebody says to you, hey, it means something to me that you're there, I think you would really enjoy this in particular, or here's the opportunity it provides to you, then that can help it, rise to the surface in terms of that person's consciousness and willingness. And then since COVID, we have struggled a little more with that, right? So it hasn't necessarily been that we have had just one agency or maybe two agencies that has been able to just sign up a slate of people so much. I do think that relationships have changed a bit. I think that people just seem to be a little more disjointed, right? There's a little less connection, I think, still that's like a holdover from the pandemic in my analysis. So what we've relied on more since then is us going out to folks directly. So we've been able to recruit via some of our programs, mobile food pantries, and then a lot of word of mouth. So we've had like, a handful of people who are interested that we know of, and then they'll say, oh, I got my friend, they really want to do this, or whatever. So we'll have folks bringing in their own contacts, actually, is more commonly how the roster sort of getting built out now. And we do have like an application process that we are really for 25 thinking of revamping quite a bit and kind of making it a little more rigorous, but that's kind of a whole other like conversation to have of changes that we're considering for 25. But yeah, and then retention, we have definitely, I would love to see more people staying on than we have. I don't think that the attrition rate, if you will, is horrible, but we definitely have had some people not able to participate for a lot of those reasons that I was saying. So sometimes it's just like their work schedule changes, so then they're not able to participate as much, or they've had a crisis in the family, right? And we've also dealt with challenges within the group, right? Some people don't get along with other folks, and that creates an interpersonal challenge, and some folks have kind of taken a step back based on that. So there's a lot of different reasons. I think that the thing that has kept a lot of folks engaged is having meaningful opportunities to participate regularly in things like going to Albany to advocate with their elected officials, with their representatives, going to DC, speaking on panels, sharing their story, and having people give them like a standing ovation and really valuing what they are sharing. And then really just the monthly meetings, like people are connected. Like some people have met in this group and are best friends and never would have met before this group, so it's kind of it's like everything, it's a spectrum, but I think that having those connections with other people and just also not always having it be down to business, right? We have this balance of like, we're gonna get things done, we're gonna do our advocacy work, our education work that folks are involved in, and we're gonna like really check in with each other very meaningfully and like pause if somebody's experiencing a crisis or having something really major going on with their family. We're not just gonna breeze through that, right? We have to that's really part of that trauma-informed care lens, is making sure that we dedicate time to that too, or else it does just become lip service. There's my really long answer for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Anybody else?
A question I have is, Lyndsey, what's a good first step? So if everything you talked about, I have nothing about it in my organization, or we've decided we want to do it, but it's been put on a one-person team, or I'm in an organization with only 2, 3 people. What would you say is a really good foundational step to take?
Yeah, I think that is, it's like the least fun answer to give. I think it's going to be really organization dependent, right? I think a first step, if you really want to invest staff time into this work in a new way that your organization hasn't before, our biggest piece of advice that we have given other organizations as we've told the story over the years and done these consultation calls, basically, has really been like, you need to level set, frankly. Like the organization needs to all be on the same page as far as what kind of investment we're giving this work, and making sure that that is a staff time investment as well as an investment of funds, outside of obviously paying the staff. And I say that because we have seen where organizations say, that they're going to engage in this work, that they're excited to get it going, and they're like, we're going to start our own community advocates program. And that's like actually kind of a major leap, right? It can be, depending on where you're coming from. And the risk there, right, is engaging with folks in the community in the new way that you haven't before, and then actually ending up with a deficit of trust if we're not able to follow through on sort of like the promises that we've made and relationships we've tried to build, right? If those start to fall apart. So honestly, I would just say like a very frank conversation about what kind of resources our organization is able to willing and able to commit to this. And it's not just, it takes such time to build these relationships. So it can't be, well, this is what we're doing for 25 and then we'll see, right? It really should be like, what are we doing the next 5-10 years, and you can baby step there from that. But yeah, I just think it really has to have a long view because of that, because it can be just in terms of being decent humans, and keeping up good relationships, but also in terms of an organization's reputation. I mean, that can be a very delicate thing in these circumstances. So I'd say that's number one. And then it's sort of like choose your own adventure from there. So I think starting off with the storytelling and building that into your, appeals or whatever you're doing, that can be a really good way to start, but just making sure that that's like a very dignified process, and getting to know folks deeply through that, and not just, I'm sure this is obvious, but not just kind of doing like as a one-off. And then seeing what assets you already have, like go where the energy is. Like, is there already a little group of people who are, getting together at your one of your programs or something, who are excited to meet regularly? Is there a staff person that can support that and facilitate that, once a month, and just see what grows? I would definitely advise against like doing something just because you heard it today and it sounds like we did it and it's cool, right? It's really like, what is your organization really excited about and energized about? Go with that, because it can be super draining otherwise, right? And what is, dabbling in what community connections you already do have, and who's excited about what there, what are community members that you are connected with already energized about? Because that's just going to make that just greases the wheels for everything, right?
Thank you, Lyndsey. And my other question is, you had mentioned trauma-informed care, and from my understanding, there's a place where agencies can actually do a, training in trauma-informed care for free, and the food bank actually links to that training, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So I could send that along, and Tim, maybe you could send it out to participants, but it's called the Institute for Trauma Informed Care. It's out of University Health in, I think, Austin, Texas. But if you just Google like ITIC, you could probably find it pretty quickly. But again, I can share that. And they have a bunch of cool programming regularly that is offered once a month. So they have an intro to trauma-informed care, and it's a live webinar, but they do these monthly. So an intro to trauma-informed care, implementing trauma-informed care, and then they have like a couple other levels from there. That's again like choose your own adventure. Yeah, thanks, Lyndsey. So those are free. Yeah, and you just look at the calendar for the month and sign up for whatever suits your fancy. And again, a lot of these, sometimes it is more focused in this framework comes out of the mental health field. So a lot of times you'll hear them say things like our patients, or we have to, but you can just kind of translate for yourself. And it's still really applicable, even if they're kind of using that language in whatever resource you find.
Thank you, Lyndsey. I'll definitely send that out. And for everyone who is on right now, Lyndsey Mott just put that in chat. So I think we have about 4 minutes left, so I think we'd have time for 1 or 2 more questions, maybe, if anyone has. Lyndsey, when I send out the recording to everyone, is it okay if I include your contact information if people have questions?
Absolutely, yeah. Feel free to shoot me an email. Give me a call at the food bank. I'd love to chat more.
So does anyone have more questions?
I have one if no one has.
I'm not hearing anything else, so go.
Go for it. I'm just plugging in here. I realize my computer's about to die, but I can hear you.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, go
Yeah.
for it.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I wasn't sure if you were able to hear me. So the food bank is also covering like a big area, and it includes like rural areas. So how are you able to like reach out to them like consistently and get them involved in what you do?
Yeah, I mean, our service area is probably one of our biggest challenges. We cover 4,000 square miles, and then we've had cohorts like almost all across that at this point, right? So we are definitely using technology. So we have our monthly meetings on Zoom. We try to meet in the middle, right? So we're often like meeting in a WeGo or somewhere that's in the middle of the service area when we do meet in person. And then that's part of the steering committee model that we're just getting into a little more now. So the concept is there's sort of like a rep from each county that will kind of like check in a little more with um, program members who are in their county and be almost like the spokes in the wheel there. And maybe host like in-person get-togethers for the county, right? That's a little bit easier for folks to access and not have to drive as far. And then just connecting with folks. We're always making phone calls and texts, sending texts, checking in with folks. How are you doing? See if there's any resources we can send along. And then just having events, so we we have these various requests basically for community advocates to come work with folks, and then they just get to engage in whatever's local to them or whatever they can get to and meets their like expertise area and things like that. So yeah, it's a puzzle for sure. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. I've learned a lot.
Oh, thank you. Oh, Tim, you're muted.
Today's the day, I guess.
Today's the day. Happens to the best of us.
Thank you for everyone who's come by today. And yeah, I want to again, I've said thank you 5 times. I'll say it to 6. Thank you, because I think this was a great way to start off this conference. And I'm looking forward to, looking back at the notes I was taking during it. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me. I really appreciate having the opportunity. And yeah, feel free to reach out if anything else comes up. We love talking about this stuff, so happy to chat more. Hope everyone has a great rest of the conference.